You know things are about to get serious when doors start getting removed. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In my last video, I showed a repair that I did to a rust hole in the driver's side front fender. In that video, I showed where the driver's side rocker has been damaged. Let me show you. So there you can see the damage in that rocker. It looks like somebody had decided to try to jack the truck up and use the rocker as a jack point, which didn't work out all that well. So that's the repair that I'm going to be starting today. In order to get to this seam on the rocker, the first thing I had to do obviously was pull the door. I may have to pull the fender because there's going to be spot welds down along the front edge of the rocker, but I'm hoping I won't, but I probably will. So there you can see that there's the dent in the rocker. However, looking at it closer, the damage actually travels most of the way back along the rocker. If I throw a straight edge on there, you can see, I don't know how well this will show up, but the bend in the rocker actually starts somewhere back here. So which means I'm going to have to figure out exactly where or about where, and then I'll make my cut probably somewhere around here and remove this entire front part of the rocker. So when I was preparing to do the repair here in the fender, I bought a whole patch panel from LMC Truck, and I used that to patch that rust hole. At the same time, I bought a whole rocker from LMC Truck in preparation for doing the repair here. So I'm going to figure out exactly how far I need to make the cut back in the rocker, and then I will use the patch panel to replace the piece that I cut out. All right, so I went ahead and I peeled back the weather strip to expose this seam here, and I'm going to use this sander. I picked this up from Harbor Freight. I'm going to use this to sand along this edge to try to expose all the spot welds along here. Well, it's pretty obvious that somebody's been in here before. I mean, the first thing I saw was, I think I may have run into a little bit of Bondo there as I was sanding. It's kind of hard to tell. But the real giveaway that somebody's been in here before, there's a brush inside the rocker. You know, so yeah, that was in there. And actually, so you find some weird stuff sometimes when working on these. When I first got the truck, inside the fender there was actually an old Bud Light beer can. So yeah, who knows what you're gonna find when you start tearing into some of these older projects. Now that I've got all the damaged area of the rocker cut out, I'm going to start prepping the area for the new rocker to get installed. And I'm just going to take a surface prep disc and I'm going to sand down or just clean up all of this whole flange here where the top of the rocker will get spot welded. And same along the bottom there. I'm going to clean up that whole area with a surface prep disc, get all the surface rust off it, and just get it ready for welding. Same with up here in the front where the rocker will overlap this area. I'm going to clean all that up and prep the joint here for welding. Once I get all that done, I'll cut the new rocker to size, and then I will start punching all the holes for doing all the spot welds. All right, so now you can see I got pretty much everything cleaned up and prepped for welding. I did use, I said, one of these surface prep discs on the drill, and then I also went in for some of the tighter areas and a little more stubborn paint and crap that was on there. I did use a red Scotch-Brite on a die grinder. I didn't use any kind of sanding discs or flap wheel or anything like that because, you know, this sheet metal is already like 19 or 20 gauge or something. It's already really thin, and it's old, and there is some surface rust. And so in order to minimize removing any metal and making this even thinner and more difficult to weld, I opted to just use surface prep discs and red Scotch-Brite, just so I wouldn't remove any metal. But now that I got everything pretty much sanded down and prepped, I got the rocker cut to size. I'm gonna throw it on here. We can see how it's gonna look. All right, so there it is. I'm leaving just like a little 1/16 of an inch gap or so back here for welding, and that leaves me pretty much the right gap I need between the rocker and the fender. I have gone over and looked at the other side, and the distance is pretty close. Actually, I'm actually a little far forward right now. The gap back here is a little bigger than what it needs to be, but when it comes time to weld, I'll make sure that I get this gap right, and that'll make sure that everything else is aligned properly. I did kind of pull down and bend the rocker a little bit. I'm not sure about this stamping. It seems like it might not go back far enough to the pinch weld. I won't know that really until I can get a few tacks in here to hold it in place, and then I'll probably be able to make it fit. But the next step will be to start punching some holes in this flange here and the one on the bottom, and then get everything, get this protective coating sanded off and get it ready to spot weld in place. There you can see I've got all my holes punched out, and I've got the surface cleaned up around each hole, ready to be spot welded. To get all those holes punched, I really wanted to use, I had one of those Harbor Freight pneumatic hole punch flange tools, but that thing was just a piece of trash. It crapped out on me. So I ended up having to punch all those holes manually. And what I ended up using was one of these just manual punch tools. I think I got this from Eastwood, I think. I ended up ordering a new pneumatic punch, but it wasn't here yet, so I had to rely on this thing. It works fine. It just kind of distorts the flange a little bit because the area here to work is so close that it ends up bending that flange a little bit, so I had to bend it back. But this thing, I mean, worked great. I forget what size hole I ended up punching in it. Let's see if I can get it to focus on it. I think it was 1/4 inch holes. Yep. So I just punched 1/4 inch holes in that panel, and ready to start welding it up. Also, I've got one of these panel gap tools just set in there to make sure that I get this gap correct for welding. I've also got a magnet here holding it level. This area is going to be the most critical, where I really want everything here to line up perfect. So I'm going to make sure I get this sill detail all lined up perfect. I'll tack it together. I'll start in this area, and then I will work my way across doing all the spot welds. Once I got everything welded in place, I did give it a coat of seam sealer along the joint there, and I didn't just leave a bead, but I did kind of smooth it out and force it into the joint. And I also put a coat of seam sealer up underneath the weather strip along that joint there. Gave everything a coat of primer, and there is the new rocker. So overall, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. There were a few issues when it came to the way that rocker was stamped. The first being that the front edge of it sits a little high. It wasn't shaped quite right to sit a little bit lower in the door jamb, and that meant that the gap underneath the front of the door is a little bit less than what it is the back of the door. So the front looks like it's a little bit higher. Overall, I'm okay with that. It doesn't look horrible, and it's just something I had to deal with. The second issue being that where the rocker comes underneath the cab, there's that where it curves underneath and then comes to 90. We're supposed to meet up with the cab detail, and that's where it's supposed to get spot welded. In order for that to reach, I would have had to push it really far back, and then the curve wouldn't have lined up with the fender. I just think the stamping itself is a little small, but I made it work. What I did was the flange on the cab, I just kind of bent it forward a little bit, and then where the rocker comes under and then comes down, I not only spot welded it, but I also welded along the bottom of the seam, and that seemed to hold it. It does sit a little high to the fender line underneath, but again, I'm okay with that. It was more of an issue with the way the piece was formed. But again, overall, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. The welding along the back, I did use, again, a little bit of body filler like I did with the fender, just to kind of fill in any little imperfections. And once I got that filled in and sanded, hit it with primer, it's almost invisible. So again, overall, really happy with the repair. I'll try to put a picture up here of what it looked like before with the dent, and then obviously now it looks a whole lot better. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll catch you on the next one.